So, welcome back to our masterclass photo film. Now I have the pleasure to present my friends Katja Pratschke and Gusztáv Hámos. They are media artists and doing artistic research. They are multimedia artists, I could better say.
Intermedia.
And intermedia, of course. Because they work with all the medias we know, the technical medias we know, photography, video, film. They are doing installations or exhibitions and symposia, books, publishing books, film series, workshops. We did a lot together around photo film, but you also have other themes, of course. And so what is connecting us is this idea of practice and theory, that we are interested at the same time in the theory of what we are doing. And you do it, what I'm impressed most, that you do this kind of work on a really international level, in collaboration with many artists. We learn from them, we share our interest, our knowledge. It's an exchange, and that's why you have already taught or showed film in many parts of the world, in India, in San Francisco, Washington, London, Tate Modern, Portugal, Brasilia, yeah. So, yeah, we have the second part. We had already the first part was the cities films, and now we have one film only, and you will explain a little bit what it is about, and it will show us the clips. So,
shall I start? Okay.
Yes, please.
So, Rope. This is a film based on a Ambrose Bierce novel with the title An Occurrence at the Old Creek Bridge. The story is occurring in 1860 something, while the Civil War situation. My personal fascination with the Civil War histories based back on a experience in Hungary. Gábor Bódi did with a film in the early 70s entitled Amerikanische Ansichts, or American Ansichts card, or however. And one of the fascinations was awakened that we learned that the civic revolution in the 1848 were defeated, and all the revolutionaries went to America, or most of them went to America, especially Hungarian revolutionary like Kossuth went to America. And, well, Kossuth tried to find some support in America for the civic revolution, but most of the fighters of the civic revolution went into the Civil War. So that was a very interesting notion that, or revelation even, that lots of Central European people went to America to fight against slave ownership. Well, at least they was told so. So much about the background, I guess.
Yeah, and Gábor Bódi's film American Ansichts is also based on a short story of Ambrose Bierce,
George Thorsten.
And that's how you actually came across Ambrose Bierce. Before I met Gustav, heard the first time during my studies about Ambrose Bierce and this short story. And actually, this story was for a long time, before we started working on this 2014, was already something we always were thinking about. Okay, we would like to do a film with this. And 2002, we started working with Transposed Body, our first photo film with the still image in film. 2005, we did our second photo film, Rien ne va plus, based, as a starting point, the Sartre novel Le Jeu sans fête. And with Thomas, we started also 2005 to curate film programs, and 2006 doing several conferences on the still image in film. And this was also the time when we came across the terms Deleuze used, the time crystal. So for Rien ne va plus, for example, the moments, because it's a story where two of the main characters die and they go into the what is this, the other world, the beyond.
May I just tell something about how connected the Rien ne va plus, our film, and the time crystal?
Yeah, please.
It's the connection is basically leads us to last year in Marienbad, René. We are quoting. We made quotations of the last year in Marienbad, and the last year in Marienbad, the film last year in Marienbad, is the reason why Deleuze developed the idea of time crystal, because, well, it's a little different actually than our idea about the time crystal, because Deleuze thinks that is just a particular moment that he shows 90 minutes long. And the reason for that, because it's always, the people always saying in this film that it was last year or the year before, or maybe for 10 years. So, you know, there is just no feeling, no idea about time. So it's always repeat itself, and it somehow starts with a scene where an Italian lover came to the main character's wife and saying that they have an appointment or a date, and they should leave now. But they actually they repeat all the time the same things with a little change. But basically, that's the idea how Deleuze describes the time crystal.
So, and we worked this through our film Rien ne va plus. Here you see images of the moments which play in the beyond, and here they're just coming out of the beyond. And it was very interesting actually to do the film, most of the film through reflecting surfaces and reflecting water and putting them upside down. And then 2012 to 2010, we finished the film Fiasco, based on Imre Kertész's novel with the same name, where Kertész, who survived Auschwitz, he came there when he was 16, returns to Hungary, to the Stalinistic Hungary, and has this kind of feeling of déjà vus. So everything what he lives through in these years coming back from Auschwitz is like a permanent repetition. So this was like a second term of dealing with time figures in this film, and we used this by telling the whole film in split screen and using different ways of doubling images, of stereophotographic, of panoramic, of mirroring images, and use this method through the film. Here you can see we also publish it as a book, and try to transform filmic methods also into the book. You can see here there's a stripe with images in an apartment, and it was interesting to work with this. Okay, the left side, the right side. You have different possibilities of changing and rhythm in the way a split screen works.
So now we are Ambrose Bierce part. Ambrose Bierce left home with 15 and went into the Civil War as a topographer or a surveillance intelligence. So actually in the film from Bode, it starts with actually Hungarian topographers who are actually observing the enemy lines, and the topographic interest was to be able to locate the enemy on the field, and that's what actually Ambrose Bierce also has done. While he was intending or participating in the Civil War, he was collecting stories, and I think until 1891 he writes a whole lots of short stories and novels, and you know the titles. You even just brought some of them, like The Devil's Dictionary, and what
okay,
else?
so Ambrose Bierce, I think he's most famous for, I have here The Devil's Dictionary, and also his ghost and horror stories. But the story we were interested in is out of this book, Soldiers and Civilians. And actually, he didn't collect them. I think most of the stories are really the short stories. When you read them, it's very much about the trauma of war, because this civil war was just very bloody, and huge armies, like 50,000 people fighting against each other with a lot of dead people. So the interest for us in this story, An Occurrence at Old Greek Bridge, was actually that there is also this term of duration, which we had during the masterclass a lot of times. And we had this feeling that Ambrose Bierce, so the Civil War ended 1865, he published the stories in 1891, and in this time, a lot of things happened. So there were a lot of like inventions who made possible that things become visible. People were not able to see or perceive just with their eyes and ears. So there was, of course, the chronophotography invented, which you will later see.
My bridge in America and Marais in France.
My bridge, yeah. So this was actually the interest, why we were interested, beside what you said about your interest in the American Civil War, but this was actually why we thought this could be an interesting photo film.
Well.
So we went to America.
Yes, we went to America.
Where Ambrose Bierce was a topographer. We went to the battlefields, and actually the pictures you see now, this is Shiloh, because in his story he names certain places, and he says that this story happens between two battlefields, in Shiloh and in Corinth.
There is even a cannon. You can't really see, but it's there. Up there, there is a cannon, because this is also a memorial, a Civil War memorial too. And I guess it was also a place where before, I mean, for 100 years ago, probably there was also a panorama build.
Yeah, so what we did, we searched the whole story. We actually, our film is also called Rope, a reconstruction of An Occurrence at Old Greek Bridge, because what we did is we looked the whole story. It's actually just, I think, 6 or 7 pages, and looked for everything. And there's a kind of circle narration. And when we went there, I think it started already that we had this feeling that actually he's not describing a certain place, but that he somehow also like composes a place, because we went actually where this river is, but never the railroad went over this river. So we had this feeling, okay, we have to go to all the places where he was actually involved in the battles of his brigade. And when we start researching, we also found that on this spot in Shiloh, that painters from Europe went there, and they got a kind of, what is Auftrag? Commission to do a cyclorama, a 360-degree painting.
May I just an aside tell that there is a French inventor, Le Prince, who actually invented the film camera, and he was involved also in this painting business, panorama painting business.
And what was interesting, that the painters, they went also to the place and they took photographs, 360-degree photographs, in order to be able to paint the cyclorama in their studios. And so we could find, for example, from this position, we could find that, okay, there was a cyclorama, a 360-degree, like pre-cinema experience, because it was huge. As a spectator, you would enter in the middle, go up and look around, and the whole battlefield just would happen around you. And here you see a second location. So we started to actually look for different, this cyclorama doesn't exist anymore. A lot of the cycloramas, they disappeared. They were actually exhibited, because this is in Tennessee, they were exhibited in the north in the north states. So our decision then was, okay, to locate certain positions where Ambrose Bierce was, positions that were connected to the story. So we started actually in Washington to photograph and ended in Atlanta. And for example, this is in Chattanooga, where he also was fighting. These are photographs of a panorama, and you see in front the objects. But this was added later, so they started exhibiting this as cycloramas, and then they added, because they had this like concurrence, what is in English concurrence? Like cinema came up, so they had to add something to the cycloramas, and this was the elements in front. Genau. So here, for example,
maybe rival, concurrent.
Rival with cinema, which came up. So this, for example, this location is here in Chattanooga on the mountain. And what was interesting, that of course the landscape in the back, the lines of the landscape, they didn't change. So now the mountains are still there. The horizon is still the same, so we were able to locate the places from where the painters in this time painted the cycloramas.
Besides the fact that they placed also cannons there, so you could actually recognize approximately the space.
Okay, so this is then we went to Athens and reconstructed, because the main character, Farquhar, is from the south. He's a plantation owner.
The one who's going to be hanged.
Genau, the one who's on the bridge and is going to be hanged. You saw him played by Lars Rudolph. And we reconstructed the plantation houses of positions for 360-degree photographs, or 8 photographs we put together to panorama, and placed this also in the film. Okay, this comes later. So Ranaf, you could play the first clip, please.
The condemned man looked for a moment at his unsteadfast footing, then let his gaze wander down to the swirling waters of the river. A piece of dancing driftwood caught his attention, and his eyes, following it down the current, How slowly it appeared to move. What a sluggish creak. He closed his eyes in order to fix his last thoughts upon his loved one. And now he became aware of a new disturbance. Penetrating through the thoughts of his wife was a sound which he could neither ignore nor comprehend. A sharp, distinct, metallic striking like the stroke of a blacksmith's hammer upon the anvil, or the tolling of a death knell. The intervals of silence grew longer and longer, the blows each hurting his ear like the thrust of a knife. What he heard was the ticking of his watch.
The moment has now come to pull the trigger. The light-sensitive plate will accept the image, revolve further and pose once more to capture the next one, and so on.
If I could free my hands, I might throw off the noose and spring into the creek. By diving I could escape, and by swimming vigorously reach the bank, race into the woods and get away home to my loved one.
Here, the sequence of pictures shows us the position that the trunk, the arms and the legs assume when running and jumping.
The captain nodded to the sergeant. The sergeant stepped aside.
So then it goes on.
Peyton Farquhar was a well-to-do plantation owner of an old and highly respected Alabama family. Being a slave owner, he was by nature also for the policies of racial segregation and ardently devoted to the Southern cause. His business had prevented him from completing service with an army which had fought the disastrous campaigns ending with the fall of Corinth. One day at their estate, while Farquhar and his wife were relaxing on their swing seat, a grey-clad soldier rode up to them. Farquhar eagerly inquired for the news from the front. "The Yanks are repairing the railroads," said the man, "and are getting ready for another advance. they have reached the old creek bridge, put it in order, and built a stockade on the north bank. The commander has issued an order declaring that any civilian caught interfering with the railroad, its bridges or trains, will be hanged on the spot. How far is it to Old Creek Bridge? Farquhar asked. About 30 miles. Are there no troops on this side of the creek? Only a picket post half a mile out on the railroad and a single sentinel at this end of the bridge. Suppose a man, a civilian and student of hanging, should elude the picket post and get the better of the sentinel. What could he accomplish? Yet at that time Farquhar did not realize that the soldier was a spy. And now, with the death so close at hand, he recognized the Yankee scout in the sergeant.
Et voila, the movement executed by a falling body.
As Peyton Farquhar first rayed down from the bridge, he lost consciousness and was as one already dead.
Oh, thank you, Anna.
So, well, now the Farquhar just escaped, supposedly, but we just decided to talk about Mary in that point. What we can see on the picture is the so-called photographic
Rifle.
What is that? Rifle. And Mary used that device to shoot movement mostly from animals that far away from his standpoint were, like birds. He studied the movement of different animals, but the photographic rifle was interesting for us also for another reason, because the movement studies of Mary was basically financed by the army, well, the French army, but we just constructed a situation where the Civil War battle situation somehow were brought together with the scientific research work of Mary. Mary interested us particularly because he did so many different experiments. So, for example, here, this folding body experiment. This is something unique that you cannot find, for example, by Murbridge or anybody else. So, and also because Mary did not just did this photographic work, but also, for example, that device, what we have seen on the horse before, that was, for example, for the, here you can see up to the right, and that was the interesting notation technique that you can see down below the horse is he was trying to find out how, with what hoof, how long, the duration of the movement. So he could, with this special device, find it out. And this is the reason why in our film, this guy, hold this strange device, which has actually nothing to do with the narrative, but refers to the experiment of Murray. Then you see also the other photographs down there, and this is how someone is marching, and they could record this these face images only because, you know, back then the photographic material were unsensitive, so therefore they needed an environment which allowed them to see the basics of the movement. So what they have done, they constructed the cloth completely black, and they applicated, like here, white stripes that could show the phases of the movement. So, and this actually exactly that kind of movement analysis was something that the army was interested in, because they had to know how they build uniforms that could be used for different movements in a battlefield.
And how it's related to the story from Ambrose Bierce, because at the moment when Farquhar falls into the water, all his senses become very sharp, and he sees things microscopically in slow motion. He sees things, animals, he sees the movement of fishes, and he becomes very, very sensitive. And for us, when we read the story, I said this at the beginning, of Bierce, we had this feeling that Bierce had in mind, like everything, like developed technically around him in this time, and also chronophotography.
So, here comes Henri Bergson, who describes movement with an example of marching soldiers. But I wanted to make another quotation of him. In 1896, Henri Bergson had, parallel to the beginning of film history, faultlessly discovered in his book, Matière et Mémoire, the experience of movement images. In 1907, he noted in L'Évolution créatrice that human perception tends to view reality in self-contained frozen states as some kind of snapshots. Perception, language, intellectual understanding all proceed in this general way. Such a nice notion. Our perception apparatus can only intuitively infer real movement, the true duration, but we are unable to size movement itself and comprehend it. Thus, in the cinema, the sensing consciousness continually jumps back and forth between the comprehensible and the inconceivable.
Okay, please play the second clip.
The sound of a clear, high voice in a monotonous sing-song now rang out and came across the water. How cold and merciless! With what accurately measured intervals fell those cruel words.
Company! Attention! Shoulder arms! Ready! Aim! Fire!
With chronophotography, the trajectory of the projectile can be captured, permitting the revelation of the change to the rifle bullet propelled by the gunpowder. Yet this does necessitate accepting the idea of time being present in the image.
Farquhar dived as deeply as he could. The water roared in his ear, yet still he heard the dull thunder of the volley. And when he rose again towards the surface, he was met by shining bits of metal. Suddenly he felt himself whirling round and round, spinning like a top. He had been caught in a vortex and was being whirled on with a velocity of advance and gyration that made him giddy and sick.
In fact, you can generate most geometric shapes and patterns in your mind with various movements of lines and points in space.
What seemed to him like an eternity later, he was flung upon the bank of the river. The sudden arrest of his motion restored him to himself. The whistling and raining down of bullets in the branches high above his head roused him from his dream. He sprang to his feet and raced into the forest. He had not known that he lived in such a wild region. There was something uncanny in this revelation. At last he found a path which led him in what he knew to be the right direction. How soft indeed was the carpet of leaves the forest floor had unfurled for him. No longer could he feel the earth beneath his feet. Soon he was footsore, fatigued and ravished. Yet the thoughts of his loved one drove him on. His neck was in pain, and lifting his hand to it, he found it horribly swollen. Doubtless, despite his suffering, he had fallen asleep while walking, for images were now unfolding before his eyes. Perhaps he has merrily awoken from a delirium.
A man dressed in black will remain invisible before a dark background, and only the white stripes and dots can ever become apparent in a chronophotograph. The pattern so created can include a vast number of images, and thus the element of time in its entirety, with the element of space contained within it reduced to its obligatory essence.
He stands at the gate to his estate. All is as he once left it. and pushing open the first and then the second gate, he sees his most beloved one still awaiting him. He springs towards her with extended arms, her face full of laughter, as he tries to touch her, to capture her.
Je vous aime. Je vous aime. Je vous aime. Je vous aime.
Just as he is about to embrace her, he feels a stunning blow upon the back of the neck. A blinding white light blazes about him. Then all is darkness and silence. Peyton Farquhar was dead, his body, with a broken neck, hanging beneath the timbers of the Old Creek Bridge.
So A Dead Man's Dream was actually the title Ambrose Bierce didn't publish, but was a kind of subtitle to the book, and we wanted to add this at the end of the film. The man you see at the end is Marais had an assistant, Demeni, how do you pronounce him correctly?
Demeni.
You know, he was Hungarian and interested. He recorded this Je vous aime and also Vive la France. He was also an inventor and assistant. He was constructing the photo chronograph and this relationship between Demeni and Marais, we also took this into the story. It's also interesting because the actor plays a kind of double role. He is as well Demeni as the person, one of the union.
The scout.
Yeah. So, genau. So we talked about Marais, the chronophotography. We talked about reconstructing position. And you have seen that actually the panoramas we did in America, we cut them into stripes. So we have these 8 pictures and we cut every picture into stripe in 8 stripes and started to, and also to combine certain kind of panoramas. And for example, this is a very interesting position. Bierce was part of a company and they lost some of the soldiers and they were fighting here at these places. And this was one of the first monuments erected even during the Civil War. You can see a picture here. And in our movie, it's these 2 panoramas who come together. The story, and he has in one of these Civil War stories, he writes about this monument. It's actually somebody on a horse who meets somebody. They start to talk, and and he gets this feeling that that he missed something, and he comes to this place and he recognized that he's dead. That's the Hazen Monument at Stones River. And the cemetery in Washington, a lot of people know, is actually also, the cemetery started during the Civil War on the hill, in the Rose Garden. So, and here you can see, for example, this is in Atlanta. Ambrose Bierce was shot in the head. He didn't arrive until Atlanta. It's a combination of different panoramas, but I think it's two in Atlanta. There was also cyclorama, and that's actually where his division ended, and he was transported back on a train to safety. He survived. For example, one topic was this bridge, because we couldn't find this bridge anymore. So we started to collect bridges on the way where Ambrose Bierce was working as a topographer. The stratigraphic image.
Yeah, okay.
Now we developed for the film a way of editing. And you see we have these marée elements, we have the panoramas becoming zoetropes, and then we had this reconstructing of the narrative, which we shot in Germany, here in close, like the river is the Oder, the garden is Wörlitz, and we developed a certain way of editing. As you could see, it's a kind of piling the images and trying to fix them. And in the editing, I fixed always on the landscape, not on the people. So you have seen, for example, if she swings and she swings back and forth, the background, actually the landscape becomes one. And yeah, and Gustav
becomes
wanted
extended.
to,
Okay,
you know.
the stratigraphic method is actually the stratigraphic image. The concept is also developed by Gilles Deleuze. So, and here some short remarks. I just read it in a minute. The stratigraphic method of the photographers was taken by us and recorded using the digital stacking process, then layered in the editing process by compositing. In this way, movement sequences can be visualized a la marée, or individual images stacked on one another can show how the illusion of movement a la Muybridge is created. Movement and space are addressed thematically in Rope, A Dead Man's Dream. In that direction of movement open up the space, or panoramas, as just Katja says, taken on the battlefields of the American Civil War, are set in motion through methods inspired by zoetropes. So those are still images, but we still see somehow the movement if we just moving around the panorama. All these methods serve to explore the nature or condition of the image in cinematographic context. From this, one can recognize that images are neither still nor moving.
Okay, thank you.
You can ask questions via the Facebook chat. Please use it. We'll look from time to time to find if there are some questions. Here in the room also, you can ask any questions you like. Of course, we just start to come in a little bit and was discussion.
Now there's a comment from Bernd Günther Namm. Maybe I read
She's
this.
already quicker than me.
He said, "Congratulations, I really like your solutions, and reconstructing of the images in their technical realization, the movement of the standing, the deepening of the moment, the movement of visual energy and surprises." Thank you.
Can I just say something? Am I able to?
Sure. Sarah?
Well, it's really a comment, and I'm not organised now with my funny nose, but I was really impressed. I really enjoyed, well, going backwards, I really liked how that ended just now, saying about the image is neither moving or still. I think that's so nice. But I was actually thinking that something about, I'm working backwards my ideas, that something about seeing those images that you've rendered it as static frames. I thought myself that sometimes the image has to be still to see it in a way. But I was thinking the process of the way, oh my God, I'm just seeing myself now, never mind. The way, it made me think that it just gives you time to think. When you see the still images, to think about, just to think really. And I thought that was lovely to have all these ideas brought to life with Murray. And I got a sense also of La Jetée and of Alain René's film last year. I've seen it so many times, it was beautiful. And I actually got this sense just working at the end of La Jetée. And I loved how you've restaged Murray, the whole thing of Murray, and to bring that into this and restaging his experiments. I thought it was really beautifully done. And I really enjoyed just seeing. I just get a lot of pleasure, if I'm allowed to say that. But it's the pleasure to think, as Aristotle said, it's the pleasure to think and to be given time to reflect on. The costumes say a lot in terms of this history of plantation, and that's the background that you're not speaking of. Obviously, it's the big subject in a way. And to see that it just gives you a sort of restful time to sit and think. And I don't know if I've got anything intelligent to say more than that. But yeah, I did see those things and I thought it was beautifully done. And I really did enjoy it. And actually to hear more of this close reading of Deleuze and to pick out these details from him, I found fascinating. I still need to see these works we've just seen a clip, haven't we? Is that right?
Yeah, it was 2 clips. The film is half an hour long.
Both of them. I'm responding to the second, and it's almost too much time to go back to the other. I'll need to see it, which I now, really want to do. I wasn't able to because I was preparing for mine. Thank you.
We should send a link to her.
It's on the list. You got the list as well, no?
Yes, I have. So
everyone who has registered has become the email with the links.
So I can do it. I'm just saying I will, and I found that really fascinating with the sound and fascinating and beautifully done.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe we start with the first scene you have shown to us. No? We see the actor Lars with his closed eyes, and it's the split screen remembrance scenes with his wife and some blacksmiths, maybe. I just hear the noise. I don't know.
No blacksmith in this movie.
No, what is it?
No,
This is time.
But it's also
time.
It is also in the narratives.
Yeah.
That he was actually hearing his clock.
His clock, but that's after. What is the second image? The women in the split screen,
He hears his watch like the blacksmith hammering.
Okay.
And what we used actually is indeed the death knell. That's what you hear.
Yeah.
And the 2 men, they are like arranging this, how you call this, this swing thing.
Yeah.
And this is also a reference to Gabor Bodi's film American Ansichts, because the swing plays a huge role because the main protagonist is a fatalist, who just goes through the war and don't cares.
But this is the story of George.
Yeah, genau.
This is
this is a reference and quotation to Gabor Bodi's film.
Yeah.
And this is the second picture, actually.
Yeah, okay, so I understand. Yeah. So can we say that the whole film is just one prolonged moment of death?
Yes.
No.
Yes. Yeah, because
Okay,
we worked, actually, I thought in the beginning, I want in every picture the rope,
Yeah.
So this was my idea, that everywhere there should be the rope, you know. So that's also why we selected this experiment of Marais, with the rope and the dead body falling. And for me, it's like this, that this moment is as long as this rope is long, you know. So when they go in the labyrinth, you hear also the rope, you know. And as long as we have these moments of rope, you know,
the life is still
duration,
there.
Yeah. But the duration could be there are a lot of writings about, for example, that Ambrose Bierce experienced hangings and how long a hanging takes and when is the person dead, you know, how long is this moment, you know? And this was
How long
also,
is the rope?
Yeah,
Did
you know, as long as the rope is.
You
Yeah.
have done research, which is the best,
Oh, God.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have this the scene because you mentioned it already. The horse was the rope, and then no, there's a soldier with an apparatus with the rope, and it is highlighted always, no, the rope. No? So it is like, is it like a fantasy of the rope in the brain of the man condemned to death?
It's an all over presence of the rope. You know, that you can see in this. Well, you could also say that this film shows a whole range of possibilities what you can do with a rope, besides hanging. You can obviously hang a swing, but you can also connect things with each other. You can lead someone from somewhere, maybe, but you can also. Well, there are some things that actually isn't shown in the film, like you can fix boats with the rope. So there are many, but the sound of boat fixing is there. I remember in the end.
Maybe this is thinking aside, but is it like the time of a lifespan is a rope which is linear? And there are theories that time isn't linear, it's actually circular if you think about the universe, but it's linear for our time. And that if it's a line, can it be a drawing? Because I was so interested that you talked about notation and these notations made of the marching soldier and how movement can be notated, of movements of the marching soldier and the horse, of course, you know, the movement of the horse. And I find that fascinating that these movements can be notated and therefore recreated. Because it's notated, it can be redone. You've got a key to this motion and therefore it can be replayed. And so its time can be rewalked which is sort of what you're doing. You're doing a rewalking anyway of that. For me, that's what the rope or the thread, if we talk about a thread in a film and the thread through your life, the finiteness of a life in some ways, but then if it's threaded through and goes back through others, then there's this also collective thing where it joins others, and that's sort of what you're doing potentially, maybe. I mean, that's my thought on it, partly.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. There's something collective inside your work, always. It's your work with texts of other people, beginning with Thomas Mann, Emil Kertész, and so on. But there's always a response from your part. And to put it in a more simple way, in this film you have located the positions, and that was the starting point. And then we have a kind of program you did say on the first day. Gustav has very often shot sequences which follow a kind of program. And the program here, to me, is to find the differences. Because we have the differences that time has produced. Because we have always these two time layers, now and then, as in the film, the Berlin from the Cities series you made. So it's to have the two time layers and to make a think about the gap. Is it that to let a think the gap, maybe even?
Well, this is true. On the one hand, there is always a very interesting time span between some historical moment and now, and it's always interesting to think about how we remember something, especially how we remember something that we have never experienced, for example, the Civil War. But we still somehow remember it. And then Gabor Bode's intention was also to to show a cinematographic method which was marking this time span. So in his film that you probably don't know, none of us, you know this film. So then you know that he reworked a whole lots of sequences to look like daguerreotypes on the one hand, and on the other hand, he drove also some signs, you know, how, for example, the topographer would watch things, or how, you know, they were count distances and basically also movements. So that's how Gabor referred to the time span, and we decided to do it in a different way, but we're referring to the time span too, obviously. For example, the costumes. Obviously, this is something that marks the time, and then we mix it actually with the panoramas which were shot today. Go ahead.
Yeah, to me, maybe I wasn't clear because it's such a kind of difficult concept, but for me, the rope or the thread is the journey in space. You go here, then here, then here. That's what you've done in your film. You've mapped out. It's to do with mapping and notation and a journey and a certain precision. This is the actual place. This is the actual place. This happened. So there's a journey in space that you're working with, but also then the journey in time. And it's both, to me, there's something about the notation, and it's not disconnected from what Mare's done with the movement of the notation of marking, because it's a sort of background of thinking about how you can document how things are documented, and you can go back and trace that. So there is some does that make sense, what I'm saying? It's a tracing, about tracing and marking both space and time. And then we have this idea of space-time that people are talking about now, where they're intersecting. You're sort of doing that, you're traveling through that and opening that up into a now that can be made into an ongoing present, future.
Yeah, and it's connected with the apparatus. That's what I found most interesting, that you have this story, but you have the apparatus in this kind. It's photo film, no? We have always two time layers or time capsules, and we have to think the movement. But as you told us, Baxon has developed this idea that we are unable to see the real movement, and because, of course, the cinematography was invented and he was inspired by the cinematographic, but he says we have an inner kinematograph, and we don't see the movement, but we have these single images, which are there, which are stapled in a way, or maybe, I don't know how they are stored. I don't know if you have an idea how these images are stored, but at least there's no movement. We invent the movement. It's our fantasy, not the movement always.
And I think it's really lovely how it's been done, where we see the sense of the movement, but we see it as stills, and therefore we are made conscious of the experience of movement rather than actually being given it, where we'll be lost somehow because it's so familiar, and we're jolted out. This process and reflection on notation, movement, mark is kept with us because it's all in stills. That's what I found, and I found that gives me space and time to think and pleasure. Yeah.
Okay, so we do not invent movement. We do not fantasize about movement, but rather our brain produces the sensation of movement. That would be my definition.
And maybe we come a little back to the photographic rifle and Mare and this part of the film, because it's included in his dreaming in his trauma situation, this prolonged death. We have all these incursions with the story of Demini and Mare. And what has he invented, in fact? What has the chronophotographic camera show? Does it show life procedures, life processes?
Well, it shows exactly what we have shown also. This chronophotography shows phases of movements. That's what it shows. And in the same time, obviously, shows us also that this kind of phases recording refers to our perception too. So this is actually the moment when the cinematographer's time defined time. And well, it wasn't actually the cinematographer; it was rather the clockmaker. It's the one who first really defined this the fact that we are that we are perceiving reality in a kind of
Staccato.
Yeah.
But I was,
That was the clockmakers. They were rather conscious about that, the fact that we create the time. That's what we create with the clock. The clock actually creates a fictional time, but also the same guy who did, or one of the clockmakers, Huygensen, he also produced the first 8 phase images in 1700 something. So he was quite sure, or quite convinced, or quite conscious about that the time clocking leads us to understand how we see movement, basically.
And the second thing, we were also interested in Murray, and we say this at the beginning of the film, because these ways of measuring and observing, there was an interest from the army and the military to use this, and he got money, he got also financed by the army, and it's interesting also that the American Civil War was the first war where photography was the first war that was photographed, and it's interesting that actually the photographs, they were taken before and after the battlefields, because of course the exposure time was not there to photograph this kind of action. So you have these photographs, there's this carte de visite, where soldiers, they went into this kind of studios to take a photograph. There were group pictures of soldiers, and then there were these battlefields with dead people. Bodies. Yeah, this was also something that like made us sure that it's good also to bring in Marais and relate this experience of war into this technical and interest of industry to develop technique.
It was the machine was stronger than the human body it was beginning at this moment, because we see in the camera the life process made visible by the camera, because as you explained to us, the horse, there was a problem of the horse. Our unarmed eye could not see if the four horse feet are in the air at the same time. It's a long story, and all the painters, they quarreled about it, and they showed different proposals. It was not before it was not possible, but with the machine and this tact, this staccato, as you explained, there it was possible to have another time register.
So the reason why you cannot see certain things like the running horse legs is exactly because those are the limits of human visual perception. So, and I'm quite sure that another animal, for example, an eagle, or what's that?
Fly.
No, the huge bird.
Eagle?
The eagle,
Yeah.
yeah. An eagle would have
Could
see the differences because they have 4 times more
Accelerated
phases,
phases. Yeah, okay.
in their movement perception than human has.
Any other questions? It's the chance now to we can have a look if there's something there.
We have 4 more minutes.
Yeah.
Also, Bernd Günther Namm was not finished, so I maybe read the second part. It's a bit like if the film projector had been invented, but never the film camera, and you found so many alternate inventive ideas to project movements and write time and tell your story. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Just Selbstlob. Read my own.
Okay, so let's think about the closing statement.
Yeah.
But actually, I wanted to say something. Yeah, Sarah?
I'm just interested to ask a question about these photographs made before and after the Civil War, because I'm afraid I don't know about it. And how did that connect, obviously, with the way of wanting to document this, and if it's done in a studio and, you know, this is an alternative to a painting, I suppose, in a way. I don't know, I was interested to know more about that. Perhaps that's unfair to...
Yeah, there comes this cyclorama, because actually to really show the battles, they did the cycloramas, you know, these 360-degree paintings where you were like coming up. We went to Gettysburg and to Atlanta, where you still have 2 cycloramas, and you come in and you enter in the middle of the cyclorama, and there was also kind of narrative, but I think they added this. Like when it started, it was without narrative, it was without objects in front, but they had this kind of, cinema was coming up, so this, you know, they really had to make it more attractive. And but in the beginning, it was this 360-degree paintings. There were companies in Wisconsin doing this. There was a lot of European painters coming to the States doing this. And actually there, for example, in the North, like in Chicago and so on, there were, of course, they exhibited their successful battlefields. The ones the Union won, and in Atlanta, for example, is the opposite, you know, because this is in Georgia, so it's in the South, and I think, you know, this was the real deal in this time when Ambrose Bierce published the story.
They are propaganda devices, basically. They propagate the winner.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the closing words, Gustav. Maybe I try one idea. In the end, we understand he is dead, of course, no? Because as he always tries to capture his wife, no? She escapes, and he never. No? It is not possible. No? And can we relate it to La Jetée? So that's the one and only photo at first, a real photo film. Not, of course, not the
I
first.
think you can most of the good movies relate to La Jetée, definitely, because it has also lots of layers.
Let me explain to the people who don't know
it's
La
got
Jetée.
still images. It's made with still images. So I mean, that's the key
it's made with still images.
Not
and
that many films are.
It's about
and
time.
This relationship with the woman who dominates the image, the film.
It's about time travel, and according when I use your interpretation here, no, the man in La Jetée is already dead too. That's my question, because it's just a fantasy time travel, because there is everything outside of the world is destroyed. There are pandemics and everything else, and they live in cellars, and the only thing they have left is their fantasy.
Yeah, Thomas, but it is really the question of the point of view. So I can also say that he never dies, just as much. But on the other hand, you have to you have to be able to develop an idea how a dead people can fantasize anyway.
Yeah,
Maybe it's between. Can it just be between?
Yes, that's a very good, the third kind of being.
Well, it's unresolved. It's not one thing. It's not one.
It's maybe also like
not real anyway. It's not real anyway.
The staple of image is not a staple, you know, it's flat.
yeah.
So this is maybe also something
Yeah, yeah.
related to this.
Because you must maybe explain that you, Gustav, it's right. You did staple photography, where every image is, every frame is a frame, every face is a face, no? And it's not, no, you don't film whole sequence and selected some of them, but it is a special kind which the camera nowadays allows.
Well, this is well, we talked about it, but this is technical. This is the technical thing that, you know, analog recording records always full images. Digital doesn't. Digital movie recording records just what is changing. So what we do with digital camera, actually, we do actually the same thing that analog camera will do. So we always recording the whole pictures, and therefore it's the recording method is different, and this is actually in between. You could say this is in between. This is between an analog and digital. So you could also say that this is the third kind of cinematographic event.
Yeah. Yeah, and this staple is flat. That's what Katja said. In the film you showed us, no, that this staple is always moving. We see the hands, for example, no, which hold every single picture, and it's in cities, no, in one of the city films. But the staple, yeah, the staple is always flat. So it's a kind of non-logic device, or like you are interested in trauma, in cycle narration, and in all these to go on the other side of the life or death, no? So in between, no? In Rien ne va plus, in our, no? As you showed us in the beginning. So you are interested in these special kinds of situations, of no? A little bit something.
Perceiving, and you know. Okay.
And you could say metaphorically it's not flat because of the dimensions that are being brought to it, really, in the contexts that open it.
That's why we talk about the stratigraphic image, but I compare the flatness to because we very much show Japanese photo animation, and there's Takashi Ito and also Satake Maki, and they always have this printed analog photographs, and they have these piles of images, and you see going them up and down. And here the film, actually the scene on the bridge, I piled all the photos Gustav did, and I didn't took any photos away. So actually the film is made of 3,000 pictures, you know. And I say digital because if you would have this analog, you would have a tower of pictures. And this is also actually our transition from analog photography, like the first photo film we did, Fremdkörper, was with around 300 pictures, coming to a film which is made with over 3,000 pictures, you know. And there was this idea of piling and taking from animation, because you always search for a point to fix the image. So the movement starts to appear, you know, and I decided to fix on the landscape. And what in this, you know, we were influenced by this Japanese animation films as well. And there you have this physical pile, and that's why I say our pile is flat.
Well, okay, so flat can mean different things, but my experience of seeing, I'm not experiencing a flat photograph experience. Because I'm seeing the process and the piling up, in a sense that I imagine the three-dimensionality of them piled up. Does that? So I don't get if the flatness is made less flat. Or not really. I get that sense. Sorry?
You don't like flatness. Yeah. Okay.
It's not about like, it's nothing to do with that. I'm just commenting, I'll join in. I'm just commenting on, it's not a straight issue of a flat image. Flat image means I'm brought into the illusion. I'm commenting on my sensory experience. Flat photograph, I'm in the illusion of it. I might love it, depends, you know, it's not about that. But I'm in this illusion of it. Whereas what you've done is pull me out of that illusion because I'm seeing the joins.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
I'm seeing
surely.
the edge of the paper metaphor, not literally, but I feel as if I am.
No, you are definitely right. And I'm afraid we should
Finish now.
finish,
Our
close.
3-day masterclass.
But we go on with
Yeah.
another masterclass in Hamburg.
Yeah.
And,
Sarah, thank you very much to
yeah.
be with us. It
Oh,
was
well, thank
my
you.
pleasure.
I enjoyed it so much.
Genau.
This was a really lovely session, especially. I found it very fascinating. Thank you. I will, if I missed it, thank you. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing the films and thank you for inviting me. Thank you. It's been
yeah,
great.
and thank you, Gustav and Katja, for presenting their works. Okay.
Thank you, Thomas, too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Ciao.
you. Bye.
Thank you, Sajad, Ranaf, and Tui.